Senior Financial Aid Counselor. So today, what we plan to do is talk to you briefly about two great resources that we have available for SoPA students. One of which is the SoPA Financial Aid Fact Sheet, and a second of which is the SoPA Financial Aid Checklist. So I'll talk about those two items. And then secondly, Ms. Tarnell Smith will be available to meet with you all individually in breakout rooms if you have any questions, about your financial aid. She'll have the system up. So if you have any specific questions regarding your financial aid, you can meet with Ms. Tarnell Smith and get your questions asked and answered. So without further delay, I will begin. So as a SoPA student here at Tulane, we have pretty much three great resources available for you to be successful with the financial aid process. We understand that sometimes the process can be complex, and sometimes it can be bureaucratic. So we have a great website available to everyone, which is financialaid.tulane.edu. And again, that website is financialaid.tulane.edu. It has a wealth of information that you can browse to learn more about the financial aid process. But the two resources specifically is the SoPA Financial Aid Fact Sheet and also the SoPA Financial Checklist. So let's just dive into the SoPA Financial Aid Checklist. Now, as a student here at Tulane in the School of Professional Advancement, SoPA, we can consider SoPA students for federal financial aid. Now, to apply for financial aid, we need two applications, one of which is the FAFSA, which is the free application for federal student aid. Now, when you complete the FAFSA, you must also list our school code on the FAFSA so that we can receive the results. Our federal school code is 002029. So when you complete the FAFSA, be sure to list our school code on the FAFSA so that we can get your FAFSA application. Now, the second application, the second form that we need from you is a SoPA addendum. So whether you are an undergraduate SoPA student or graduate SoPA student, we need the addendum completed. Now on that addendum, you're pretty much saying, hey, I'm Roland Keller, I'm taking 6 hours for the fall, 6 hours for the spring. When you do that, that will enable us to award your financial aid appropriately based on your degree level and your hours of enrollment. So to apply for financial aid as a SoPA student, we need two applications. One, the FAFSA, and also the graduate addendum. The SoPA addendum. If you're an undergraduate student at Tulane, SoPA student, you complete the SoPA addendum. If you are a graduate level student, you're going to complete the graduate addendum. So to apply for financial aid at Tulane, we need you to complete the FAFSA and either complete the SoPA addendum or the graduate addendum. So that's simple. Just complete the FAFSA, complete an addendum. Once you complete the FAFSA, complete an addendum, we will process your financial aid award, and you'll be emailed with the details of that financial aid award. So that's pretty much simple on how to apply for financial aid at Tulane. So that involves pretty much of the checklist. So now let's look at the SoPA Financial Aid Fact Sheet. And we created the SoPA Financial Aid Fact Sheet just to address many of the items that you will need to know to ensure your success with the financial aid process. So the fact sheet and the checklist are available on our website. And again, our financial aid website is financialaid.tulane.edu. Now, on this SoPA Financial Aid Fact Sheet, we have general information about our office. For example, we are located in Gibson Hall, Suite 120. We have a phone number, which is 504-865-5723. We have an email address. Our normal office operations is Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. And we also list our financial aid website, which is financialaid.tulane.edu. But what I love about our website is is geared to specific populations. So on our website, we have a SoPA section of our website. So if you go to financialaid.tulane.edu, you're going to see right in the middle of the screen, you're going to see something that says SoPA. Just click SoPA, and guess what? You have all these resources available to you to financial education in the School of Professional Advancement here at Tulane University. Now let's take a deeper dive into the financial aid fact sheet. There are federal loans that are available to SoPA students, both on the graduate and undergraduate level, but there are also limits to these federal loans. Now, if you are an undergraduate student, The max that you can borrow in federal loans, if you are independent, is going to be 57,500. And independent just means that you can complete the FAFSA without parental data. So if you are independent, undergraduate student, the maximum that you can take out in federal loans is going to be 57,000 rather, I'm sorry, $57,500. Now, if you are a dependent undergraduate student, which means that your FAFSA requires parental information, the maximum that you can borrow in federal loans is $31,000. So I say all this to say that you should borrow conservatively, only borrow what you need. So let's say, for example, you are an undergraduate student and you're just taking 6 hours every semester. Now, by law, we have to offer you the maximum in federal loans annually. So let's say you're only taking 6 hours and you take out the maximum federal loans annually and you get a big refund every semester. Well, we strongly recommend that you borrow only what you need. Consider borrowing less of the maximum, because eventually what's going to happen is you're going to run out of federal loans. So, just monitor your loan borrowing. We do that internally in the financial aid office, but borrow only what you need because, any money that you do borrow, you have to pay back with added interest. So only borrow what you need because eventually, if you stay in school a long time, eventually those loan funds will run out. And we want you to finish your degree. We don't want you to run out of federal loan eligibility and not be able to finish your degree programs here at Tulane University. So just remember, borrow only what you need because these federal loans have limits and we do not want you to max out on those limits. So borrow only what you need. There is a website called studentaid.gov that has a history of your loan borrowing. So if you ever want to know how much loans that you have borrowed at Tulane, you can go to studentaid.gov, look at your loan history, and that information is available for you to review. Now, also with graduate level students, the maximum that you can borrow as a graduate level student, and just let me preface this, graduate level students are categorized as independent. So when you're working on a graduate level degree, you're not required to report any parental data. So you're automatically independent for federal student aid purposes. Now, the maximum that you can borrow as a graduate level student is $138,500 in federal loans. So while the undergraduate loan limits are lower, the graduate loan limits are a little higher. But sometimes we do see some students max out on those loan limits. So the maximum in loans that you can borrow as a graduate level student is $138,500. So just borrow only what you need. And federal Pell grants. Now, on the undergraduate level, students may be eligible for the federal Pell grant. The federal Pell grant is pretty much based on need. So you complete the FAFSA, you report your income, your assets, your household size, and it's going to give you an expected family contribution number. That EFC or expected family contribution is going to determine if you're eligible for Pell. If you're eligible for Pell, great. It's a federal grant, you don't have to pay it back. But there are limits to the amount of Pell grant that you can receive. Now, on the fact sheet, we do tell you that the maximum in the Pell grant that you can receive is 600%. That's the equivalent up to 6 years. So if you're taking out full-time Pell grant. So if you enroll full-time, that's a maximum of 6 years of Pell. So the federal Pell grant, if you're eligible, you can get up to 600% in Pell. But just note that, we don't want you to run out of Pell grant. We don't want you to run out of loan funds. So just try to complete your degree in a reasonable amount of time. So if you're eligible for Pell grant, we'll let you know after you complete the FAFSA and after you complete that SoPA or graduate addendum form. Now, if you will receive any scholarships from SoPA, any tuition waivers, health insurance support, or any non-service stipends, any resources outside of financial aid, we have to include that as a resource in determining your financial aid eligibility, and it may reduce the amount of federal loans that you can borrow. So all students have what we call a cost of attendance. In your financial aid, whether it's federal, whether it's scholarships from SoPA, whether it's a tuition waiver, cannot exceed that cost of attendance. So any aid that you receive has to fit within your cost of attendance. So if you are eligible for any aid outside of the financial aid office, primarily scholarships or any other institutional assistance, we may have to adjust the amount of federal loans that you have. So let's say if your cost of attendance for the fall semester is $10,000, the maximum amount of financial aid, including federal aid, cannot exceed $10,000. So just note that if you're receiving any outside financial aid that is outside of the financial aid office, whether it's scholarships, outside scholarships, tuition waivers, all of the aid, including federal aid, must fit within your cost of attendance for that given term and given award year. Now, enrollment changes in financial aid. So as a SoPA student, both on the graduate level and undergraduate level, SoPA students are billed per credit hour, and the financial aid awards are based on the actual registered hours of enrollment. So if you say, hey, Ms. Keller, hey, Roland, I'm enrolling for the fall semester, I'm taking 6 hours, for the spring, I'm taking 6 hours as well. We're going to offer you financial aid based on that 6 hours for the fall, 6 hours for the spring. But let's say you enroll for the fall and you take 3 hours. Then guess what? We may have to adjust your financial aid based on 3 credit hours. So that means that initially we're going to give you a financial aid offer based on 6 hours. But when we see, hey, this student is only registered for 3, we have to make some adjustments. And that means that we have to reduce some aid. So it's very important that you complete the appropriate addendum. And also it's important that if your enrollment changes, you let us know so that we can make the appropriate adjustments to your financial aid. Now, dropping a class may result, in enrollment in financial aid changes, but also dropping a class may negatively impact your eligibility to remain to remain eligible for federal financial aid in the future. And I'll get to that. That's pretty much SAP, but I'll get to that in the future. So just be careful about dropping too many classes, because not only will we may have to adjust your current financial aid, it may impact your eligibility for financial aid in the future. So dropping courses may impact your current financial aid, and it also may impact your eligibility for financial aid in future terms. So just be careful about dropping courses. Now, at the end of each semester, we review each student's academic performance to determine if they are doing well in their courses. So let's say, you enroll for the fall, but you drop all your courses, then guess what? We may have to return that money to the federal government. So anytime that you do not complete your courses, we consider that as an unofficial withdrawal. And by federal regulations, the federal government requires us to determine how much of that aid has to be returned to the federal government. So anytime you have an enrollment change or you may consider dropping your courses, be sure to reach out to your assigned financial aid counselor, because that may mean that we may have to make some adjustments to your financial aid. So if you think you may need to withdraw from university, or you may have some enrollment changes, be sure to reach out to financial aid so that we can advise you appropriately. Now, I mentioned something called satisfactory academic progress. We call it SAP in financial aid. And satisfactory academic progress is simply the academic requirements you must meet to retain your eligibility for financial aid. So there are 3 components of our SAP policy. So at the end of each semester, we're going to review your grades to determine if you met the requirements of the SAP policy. So what are those 3 components of the SAP policy? So we have a GPA requirement. That's the first component. As an undergraduate student, depending on your hours attempted, you must earn a minimum cumulative GPA of either 1.75, 1.85, or 2.0. So that's the first requirement. So at the end of each semester, we're going to check your grades to ensure that you are meeting the GPA component of the SAP policy. Now, the second component is a completion rate component. It states that all students must successfully pass at least 2/3 of the hours that they attempt each semester. So in addition to checking your grades to make sure that you're meeting the GPA requirement, we're going to also see if you are meeting the completion rate. So we're going to look at your grades at the end of each semester to determine if you are meeting the required GPA and you are passing a 66% completion rate. So you must have that 66% completion rate and also have that required GPA. And then lastly, there's a maximum time frame. So this formula this component just pretty much says that you must complete your degree in an appropriate time frame. But just make sure that you have the appropriate GPA, just making sure that you also pass at least 66% of the courses that you attend. If you are doing that, you'll be fine. And then lastly, the last thing that we discussed on the SoPA fact sheet is non-SoPA courses. We want you to be careful about enrolling in non-SoPA courses. As I mentioned earlier, SoPA students are only limited to federal financial aid. In the SoPA courses, the tuition for SoPA courses are typically much lower than the tuition for those courses for the full-time undergraduate students. So if you take non-SoPA courses, you're going to be billed tuition at a much higher rate, and your federal aid may not cover that tuition. So if you are considering taking non-SoPA courses on the undergraduate level, be sure to reach out to your financial aid counselor because your federal aid may not cover that tuition. And we don't want you to have issues with accounts receivable, because if you have a balance, of course, you may know that if you have a balance at Tulane, eventually we're going to prevent you from registering, and also that balance will accrue finance charges, which is like a late fee. So if you're thinking about taking any non-SoPA courses on the undergraduate level, be sure to reach out to your financial aid counselor, because 9 times out of 10, that federal aid will not cover those non-SoPA courses. So that's it on the fact sheet. But like I mentioned, the SoPA financial aid checklist and the SoPA financial aid fact sheet is available on our website. So when you get a chance, you can definitely browse the fact sheet, browse the checklist, and also browse the financial aid website. Like I mentioned, we do have a financial aid website that is designated for you as a SoPA student. And again, that website is financialaid.tulane.edu. And once you get to that website, just go to hit SoPA and you'll see the financial aid checklist. You'll see the fact sheet. So that's it as far as the SoPA checklist and the fact sheet. I know I said a lot. Do we have any questions? And I know Ms. Nell was answering questions in the chat, but if you have any questions about anything I just said, and I know it was a lot, just go ahead and unmute yourself or ask your question in the chat, and we'll get those questions answered. So let's just take a few minutes for questions. And if we don't have any questions, I think, Portia, we can proceed to the individual breakout sessions. So students, if you have any questions regarding your financial aid, you'll be placed in a breakout session with Ms. Turnell Smith, and she can answer any specific questions that you have. Now, we do have a question in the chat: where can we find the addendum? So as I mentioned earlier, to apply for financial aid as a SoPA student, all you need to do is complete the FAFSA and appropriate addendum. The addendum is on the financial aid website. So if you go to our website, which is financialaid.tulane.edu, right in the middle of the page, you're going to see a little icon that says Forms. Just go to Forms. And once you go to the Forms page, you'll see the SoPA addendum. If you're an undergraduate student, complete that. If you are a graduate level student, you'll see the graduate addendum. So the appropriate addendum is on our website on our Forms page. Ms. Turnell Smith, just put that in the chat, the link.
Are we ready for breakout rooms?
If we don't have any further questions, I think we are ready for breakout rooms. So I'm not sure how you're going to orchestrate that, but Ms. Turnell Smith will be placed in the breakout room for you if you have any questions.
Okay, perfect. So I'm gonna place everybody into a breakout room. If you have questions, you're more than welcome to stay on and participate in the breakout sessions. But if you don't have any questions, you feel like everything has been satisfied and fulfilled for you, you're more than welcome to jump off of the call. Would you guys like to be placed in a breakout room, or is everybody good? Okay, well, I'm gonna hang out on the call for a few more minutes. If you have any questions, feel free to jump in the chat.